Robin Williams had been gone for 3 months when the answer his family had spent an entire year searching for finally arrived. It came in the form of a coroner's report, a single medical finding that would rewrite everything the world believed about how he left us. His wife read it and understood for the first time what had truly been happening inside the mind of the man she loved. This is the story she has spent the rest of her life telling, and the reason so many strangers are still being helped by it today. For years, most people believed they understood the end of Robin Williams' story. They thought they knew the reason. They filled in the blanks with the simplest, saddest explanation they could find. And then they closed the book. But the woman who stood closest to him, his wife, Susan, knew that explanation was incomplete. She had lived through the final year at his side. She had watched a brilliant, quick, endlessly loving man slowly become a stranger to himself. And she had spent that entire year desperately searching for a name, an answer, a reason. She never found it while he was alive. Neither did his doctors. Some of the finest specialists in the country ran test after test, and every door they opened led to another locked room. The truth was hiding in a place no scan could reach, buried so deep inside his brain that it would only be discovered after he was gone. And when it finally had a name, Susan Schneider Williams made a decision. She would not let his suffering be misunderstood. She would tell the world what really took him. To understand what happened, you have to go back to the spring of 2014. Robin Williams was in Vancouver, filming the last of the Night at the Museum films. To everyone on set, he was still Robin, the man who could turn a quiet moment between takes into an unforgettable performance for an audience of one. But something underneath had begun to shift. It started, Susan later remembered, with fear. Not the ordinary worry that visits all of us, but a heightened, relentless anxiety that would settle over him and refuse to lift. In early April, while he was away filming, Robin had a panic attack. For a man who had spent his whole life turning nervous energy into brilliance, this was something new, something wrong. The symptoms began to gather like clouds. His hands developed a tremor. His walk slowed to a shuffle. His voice, that extraordinary instrument capable of 100 characters, grew quieter, weaker. His face, always so alive, began to freeze into a mask. He struggled to find words in conversation, words that had always come to him faster than anyone alive. And then there were the things no camera could see. Sleepless nights. A memory that kept slipping, and that anxiety, always the anxiety, tightening around him until it became a paranoia he could not reason his way out of. Susan watched all of this happen to the person she loved most, and she felt something she would later describe with heartbreaking honesty. She felt powerless, frozen in the darkness of not knowing. It was painful to watch, she said, especially when it got to the point where nothing she could say or do would help. When the film wrapped and Robin came home in early May, Susan later compared it to watching a plane come in to land with no landing gear. He had held himself together for the work, as he always had, for his whole life. But now he was home, and there was nothing left to hold up. The man who had made the entire world laugh was, in his own quiet way, fighting the hardest battle of his life. And no one, not his doctors, not his wife, not even Robin himself, knew the name of the enemy. Back home, the search for answers became the center of their lives. Doctor appointments, testing, psychiatry. Susan said it kept them in perpetual motion. There were countless blood tests and urine tests. Doctors rechecked his cortisol levels and his lymph nodes. A brain scan was ordered to look for a possible tumor. His cardiologist examined his heart again. One by one, the results came back. And one by one, they came back negative. They wanted to feel relief. But both Robin and Susan carried the same quiet dread. Every clean result only deepened the mystery. Something was terribly wrong, and no one could say what. Robin felt it more than anyone. He knew his own mind better than any instrument could measure it, and he could feel it slipping. Susan later wrote a sentence that is almost unbearable to sit with. "Robin was losing his mind," she said, "and he was aware of it." "Can you imagine," she asked, "the pain of experiencing yourself disintegrating, and not from anything you would ever be able to name or understand?" He had a way of describing it that stayed with everyone who heard it. "I just want to reboot my brain," he kept saying, as if he could sense that the wiring had gone wrong somewhere, and if he could only restart the machine, he might come back to himself. Then, on the 28th of May, they finally received a diagnosis: Parkinson's disease. For a moment there was something like hope. They had a name now. A name meant a path, treatments, specialists, a community of people who understood. Susan's heart, as she put it, swelled with hope. But somehow, she knew Robin wasn't buying it. The diagnosis explained some of what they were seeing: the tremor, the shuffling walk, the frozen features. But it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain the crushing anxiety. It didn't explain how fast he was slipping away. Parkinson's was part of the answer, but it was only, as Susan would later say, the tip of the iceberg. The real name, the true name of what was taking him, was still hidden, and it would stay hidden until it was too late to change anything. Robin Williams left this world in the summer of 2014. And here is the cruelest part of the whole story. The man who had spent his final years searching so desperately for an answer left us without ever knowing what he had been fighting. It would take 3 more months. 3 months after he was gone, the coroner's report arrived. And there, at last, was the name that had eluded every doctor, every test, every scan while he was alive. Diffuse Lewy body dementia. Susan had never heard of it. Almost no one has, and yet it is not rare. Lewy body dementia is the second most common form of dementia, affecting well over 1 million Americans. It is caused by abnormal deposits of a protein that build up inside the brain's nerve cells, spreading through the mind and slowly stealing everything a person is: their movement, their memory, their reasoning, their sleep, their very grip on what is real. When Susan met afterward with the doctors who reviewed Robin's case, they told her something that helped her finally understand the depth of what he had endured. His was one of the worst cases they had ever seen. The disease had spread almost everywhere. He had lost a huge portion of the neurons that produced dopamine, and throughout his entire brain and brainstem, there was scarcely a single nerve cell left untouched. Sit with what that means. Robin Williams had been carrying all of that inside his head, an entire brain under siege, while still trying to work, still trying to be present, still trying to reassure the people around him. The lightness he showed the world in those final months wasn't the absence of suffering. It was the greatest performance in a lifetime of great performances. The specialists gave Susan the medical language for it, but she understood it in a far simpler way. The disease had been a kind of terrorist hiding inside her husband's brain, and it had done its work in the dark, where no one could see it, where no one could stop it, where even Robin could not name it. For most people, an answer that comes 3 months too late is where a story ends. For Susan, it was where a mission began. Susan Schneider Williams could have kept all of this private. Grief gives you every right to close the door and protect what remains. No one would have blamed her. Instead, she made a different choice, one she later said she could not have lived with herself for refusing. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell this story," she said. "I had no idea the journey I was about to begin, but I had to go there." 2 years after Robin was gone, she sat down and wrote. Not a memoir, not a tell-all. She wrote a letter to doctors. She addressed it to the very neurologists who spend their lives studying brains, like the one that had failed her husband. She wanted them to see the human being behind the diagnosis and the spouse standing in the dark beside him. She titled it, "The Terrorist Inside My Husband's Brain," and it was published in the medical journal Neurology. In it, she walked those doctors through everything: the fear, the tests, the misdiagnosis, the slow disappearance of the man she loved. She ended it with a hope that they might turn Robin's suffering into something meaningful through their work, so that he would not have battled and died in vain. That letter became the most read article in the journal's entire history, and Susan didn't stop there. An artist by profession, a woman who had never planned to become a public advocate, she stepped into a role she never auditioned for. She joined the board of the American Brain Foundation and served as its vice chair. She helped establish a dedicated research fund and a multi-million-dollar award aimed at one goal: finding a way to diagnose this disease while patients are still alive, so that no other family has to wait for a coroner to tell them the truth. She traveled to Washington to push for research funding. She sat for interviews on national television. She worked with a filmmaker on a documentary about Robin's final days, a film that, for the first time, showed millions of people what this disease really does. And she helped create an educational version to teach the very doctors who might one day catch it earlier in someone else's husband, someone else's father. One story reached her that captured everything she was fighting for. A family had spent years trying to get answers for their father. A relative read Susan's essay, shared it with the man's doctor, and soon after, he finally received an accurate diagnosis. Her willingness to tell her own painful story had, in a very real way, helped a stranger find his. That is what Susan built out of the worst thing that ever happened to her. Not a monument to grief, a lantern for other people still lost in the dark. There is a way of remembering Robin Williams that gets the ending wrong. It reduces a whole life to its final chapter, and it mistakes an illness for something it was never was. Susan spent years making sure the world understood the difference. What took Robin was not weakness. It was not a failure of will or of love or of the countless people who cared about him. It was a disease, a specific, physical, merciless disease that hid itself from the finest doctors in the country and could not be named until it was far too late. And knowing that changes how we see those final months entirely. Because if Robin was carrying all of that, a brain nearly overtaken, a mind he could feel slipping, a fear he could not escape, and he still showed up, still tried to make the people around him feel safe, still reached for a joke to lighten the room. Then his last performance was his bravest one. Susan said it better than anyone ever could. From where she stood, she said, she saw the bravest man in the world playing the hardest role of his life. Those close to the film about his final days spoke of what Robin seemed to want, even at the end, for people not to be afraid, to be fearless. It is a fitting last wish for a man who spent his whole life trying to make other people feel less alone, and it is the reason his wife turned her grief into a light for strangers. She took the thing that broke her heart and used it to make sure that somewhere out there, another family would get their answer in time. Robin Williams gave the world decades of laughter, but the story of his final year gave the world something else, a truth that is still saving people today. Because of one woman's courage to speak, a disease that once hid in the dark now has a name that families can recognize, that doctors can look for, and that researchers are fighting to catch in time. That is not a story of loss. It is a legacy. It is a light that Robin and the woman who loved him left burning for the rest of us. Every story on this channel exists for that same reason, to keep that light alive and to make sure the man behind the legend is remembered exactly as he was. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Of all the characters he played and all the moments he gave us, which Robin Williams' performance has stayed with you the most, and why? Share it in the comments below. We read every single one, and there is something quietly beautiful about a whole community remembering him together. And if Robin's story touched you today, we would be honored to have you join our family as a keeper of the light. It's a small way to help keep his memory alive and to become part of our little family here. You'll find the link to join in the description below this video. However you choose to support us, thank you for being here with us. Stay with us. Help us keep his light alive.